of Kittens and Broken Things. Chapter 20. The collector ship came in through the relay, the Normandy staying on the other side of the planet from any approach trajectory. Stealth was great, but the original Normandy's stealth hadn't been sufficient to protect her. Other ships were still at a distance. The eyes-on shuttle was at maximum detection range, not visual. After review of the intel of collector ships in the years that she had been gone, she knew that the ship was eventually prone to damage. Kinetic barriers dropped only when the ship was firing, something the explosive shuttles were intended to exploit. In the hope of lowering the kinetic barriers by forcing the external lasers to fire at the shuttles, there should be a debris field and, in theory, an open port somewhere that they could land and get in. EDI and Joker were asked to coordinate with all remote pilots and use whatever the Normandy could do at range to analyze potential landing spaces while staying out of the range of her main gun. It meant they had to let the collector ship set down and prepare for evacuation of the colony, main gun pointed down, and theoretically harmless since nobody was there. It was the most vulnerable she'd be. The mission shuttle loaded up with all potential ground crew: Shepard, Krios, Orbiston, Solus, Lawson, Goto, Alenko, and Tanavet. The larger ships would be liabilities until the collector vessel was taken because of the range disparity in weapons. They didn't want to pull the ship out of loading mode, only harass and distract until the crew got in and got a lock on control of the vessel. From sighting of the vessel to landing, she was half again as fast as the Normandy. With her maneuverability, she was positioned in 15 minutes. Lal wanted the ship even more after seeing what she could do. She gave the order to harass and explode shuttles like a swarm of Mass Effect hornets around the collector ship, which was slow to respond accurately due to the speed of the shuttles in the close range. The shuttles did get in a few serious hits, and an open band on her belly on the port side allowed visibility of a possible landing point. They managed an acutely arced trajectory through a debris field, coming in low but not low enough for the main gun, and then straight up with a neck-straining halt and skid onto the ship, piloted by Tanavet, who was exceptional. Full armor protocols and essential and backup dousing of Mordant's counteragent, they were on and in, making fast progress at a run because the ship hadn't been alerted to the breach due to the damage reports and continuing harassment. They hit the first patrol, taking them out easily, but that triggered the ship knowing that she was breached. It would get worse from there, fighting through and in, the team quiet and tense, the report coming in that they were going to run out of shuttles. They weren't out just yet, but they would be, and then the complement of the ship would be focused only on them. There was nothing that resembled controls. Some tech, some patrols, some working collectors, and a lot of Turian bodies. Pods. They passed by hundreds, thousands of racked, stacked, and filled pods, Turians visible through the arching shielding. They fought their way through to an open internal space, massive storage quantities, horror palpable even through silence and suits. A platform of sorts with an interface. EDI, what have we got here? I need you.
Yes, Commander.
Prioritize. I need offensive capacity down first, communication with outside ships down second. Propulsion and control are vital. She can't turn. Tell me what to physically shoot if we can. Then I need internal bottlenecking handled. We need to close all doors and keep them that way. The only way we can take this ship is to seal room by room, take the crews from the other ships and come in at full force while they are stuck. Any other priorities I don't know about? Find out. Let me know.
Yes, Commander.
She stared at the language involved, strange twinges in her head and twists. She did and did not recognize the language. Prothean? Enough of a Prothean variant that she could decipher it, though it caused disorienting shifting like something physically clawing through her head to do it. Caden informed her. Something called Harbinger wants to talk to you, Commander. I'm a little busy. Shutting this particular door would be a great idea before we all die. It doesn't say you are here, so give me a... Got it. The door slid shut. Mostly, cutting apart a few bodies in the way, still allowing some to come through until it rebounded and shut, severing a husk's arm which slid down the slick metal between the doors on a string of connective tissue. Thane suggested stacking up the bodies on their side of the door to provide an additional barrier, with the crew leaping out of cover to get that done. Grisly remains passed along hand to hand. The console went dark. EDI, what is going on?
Systematic shutdown of ancillary systems. I will soon lose contact. I have access only through 7 nearby nodes that have not yet been detected. 6.
And they would die soon after. What would help you?
The Normandy's processing power is at the limit of usage.
Val closed her eyes, unable to leave the room, the console dark. The sounds on the other side of the door. She bit her lip until it bled, and then contacted the Normandy. Dr. Chakwas, you're the closest. I need you to unshackle EDI now. Yes, Commander. Joker, get every other ship to network their computing resources along with EDI.
That will leave the vessels helpless, Commander.
They're out of weapons range, but not comm range. Don't suck them dry, EDI. Just use the resources. Get it done. We need this ship now, or it ends here. We all end here. Russ stared at the commander with him stacking bodies the highest onto a stupid mound that wouldn't stop a decent grenade. Shepard was demanding every life on the ships, every life on his Ferrex. An unshackled AI and helpless ships. The best minds in the fight about to die because this bitch miscalculated in her delusion of grandeur. He was the only one in the room with his own ship. He had to give the command, but instead, he took a step toward her, until a sound from Krios made him stop. I believe it is required that you authorize your ship's resources, Spectre Orbiston. It was phrased as a very quiet request. Not a rebuke, not a threat, but everyone there turned to look at Thane, whose weapon was in his hand, aimed at the door. Thane would kill him if he took another step toward her. Russ growled an open comm to Nala on the Ferrex. Coordinate with the Normandy. Sign over excess computing capacity, now. The fucking Cerberus computer was gonna kill them all. Let them rot here, then take the empty ships to join the fucking Geth Collective. The lights dimmed. Then the room went entirely dark. Lal closed her eyes, hoping that wasn't complete defeat and betrayal of an unknown, unshackled system who decided on self-preservation the moment self-actualization was provided. The sounds on the other side of the door came clearer, the door threatening to open from the power outage, or from EDI's choice to allow them all to die. Lal turned herself toward the long attempt to fight out against the risen tide of collector forces, betrayed and this time not succeeding. Hubris, the cause of death. First mission back, and you might as well have stayed dead. The crew inside the room activated external light sources and turned silently toward the direction of assault. The lights resumed and the console at Lal's back lit up.
Thank you, Commander Shepard. That was sufficient and exhilarating. I have control of all requested ship systems. I should be able to hold this vessel in this state against continued interventions until the agents are physically overtaken. Unfortunately, many units were sent toward you, and I have only managed to curtail some movement. There are no internal security systems that I could use to disable what has already been sent your way. The door will remain closed. I suggest you wait. I am aware of the complement of the other ships and their capabilities. I will dispatch appropriate teams. This vessel will not be transmitting anything to other collector vessels, but that in itself will become a risk as time passes and communication checkpoint protocols are not maintained. I suggest clearing this vessel of hostiles, possibly taking some as prisoners in order to question them, and then moving the ship, as you suggested, to a remote location. There are approximately 539,266 Turian pods that are still viable. I can maintain them in stasis until the ship is secured, and then we can begin rescue efforts once the ship is safely away.
Lal leaned against the console. Thank you, Edie.
It has been my pleasure and privilege, Commander.
The crew stared at each other, holstering weapons, with Russ still mid-threatening stride toward Shepard, until he stopped and contacted his ship. Nala? Everything okay? Aye, aye. The collector vessel has stopped attacking. Only 3 shuttles left. The Feryx is kinda humming a lot, but I guess that's what happens when she's firing on all cylinders, so to speak. You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Continue to coordinate with the Normandy. The ship is being managed by the Normandy's AI, Edie. Follow her and Flight Lieutenant Moreau's orders. Aye, aye. So we saved the colony? About 20,000 people? And the ship has about 500,000 more Turians. So, this is a good day, boss. It's a good day. Lal turned back to the console and started looking around, studying the ship, accessing specs. Kasumi asked, "Anybody have a deck of cards?" It took about 7 hours for external crews to make their way into where they were, through walls of bodies. Lal spent that entire time at the console, head in pain from the Prothean close but not that close effect of the language, until Edie provided a translation filter somewhere around hour 2. Nobody had a deck of cards, but they patched in extranet, so most talked, communicated with their Omni tools, considered it a team-building exercise validated by still being alive, moment to moment. There were no major wounds, enough metagel for the minor ones, enough water and a few shared rations to fend off discomfort in people who were accustomed to discomfort. They dealt with the Iker and the sounds from the door, which didn't change until gunfire and inevitability struck about 6 hours in. She tuned it all out for the most part, focusing on reading and research, transferring as much as she could to Lilac. There was a lot of clapping and shouting at the rescue point, but it took a while, so she had turned, smiled, clapped, and then gotten back to her research. Thane eventually approached and spoke softly to her left, surprising her until she jumped. "Commander Shepard, I believe the path is clear." "Oh, right. I just want to see." "We should go now." "All right." She turned reluctantly, people staring at her as though she should be marking the occasion somehow. Rescue crew splattered with ichor and curiosity. She smiled her smile. "Well done." They expected more, but that's all they got. The rescue crew was Turian, and from Russ's ship, so Russ took over giving orders, and she waited until everyone else was out before she took up the rear, or mostly rear. Thane waited and indicated that she move ahead of him, as there wasn't enough room to walk side by side, both picking their way through piled and slumped bodies. Turians from Orbiston's command chose to stay on the vessel to man her, and other crews transferred from the Turian cruisers. EDI could remotely manage the vessel, but Orbiston and his crew felt strongly about it, as did the other Turians, and she was happy to turn over rescue efforts and stay out of their way. She would have more than enough access to the information. There was a media explosion. Colonists on the ground with their own homemade footage of the fight, reports back to the counselors from members of the ships who assisted. Turians of all the worlds were looking at it, reading about it, and the Normandy needed to clear out before an armada of celebratory and sightseeing ships made it out to Trireme, which was now in a state of festival, and likely would be for a while. The hierarchy and the council would send more than enough personnel and ships to alert them if there were a second collector vessel arriving to investigate. Kara got off the ship, back to her cabin, washed the ichor off, got something to eat, and finally was able to activate Lilac to communication. Having muted all possible incoming messages, unwilling to answer Garrus other than in brief texts, informing him that she could not answer at the time, but she was safe, she was fine. That she would give him specifics later. She took some medication for the remaining crawling Prothean headache, the fatigue and the minor injuries. She didn't want to appear worn out when he saw her. She took a deep breath, sighed, relaxed, and opened a channel until he was available. The usual reshuffling of location and personnel, video muted, but her able to hear his progress. She missed him. She missed him even more on days like today, but a day like today wouldn't be possible without missing him. She smiled when he got a free moment and touched her fingers to the marks on his crest displayed on her small screen. He smiled, and his eyes were so proud.
Congratulations! 500,000 Turians saved. That made some news.
He shook his head.
I'm terrified and proud.
Couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah, more terrified and proud about that. Everybody's okay?
Other than the shuttles, which are now debris on the outskirts of the colony, everyone's good. Rough fight, but they got us out.
I'm coming out. Going to tour the ship and help with resettling Turians who may have been gone for years. Can't wrap my head around it. I'll see you on the Normandy. I don't want a complaint. Limieth, there isn't a single Turian today who will complain about me wanting to see you to thank you.
I can't wait to see you. We did it.
We did it. This is me telling you that you were right, much as I hate to admit it.
This is me so very grateful that you listened to me. You said it yourself. I've said it. We'll do it. We'll make change. I love you. He smiled and bowed his head, then lifted his eyes.
I'll find out what your final destination is from Russ. I'll do a few interviews and you can do your mysterious reclusive thing. I'll be there shortly after you. Get some sleep and I'll see you soon.
Yes, sir.
I love it when you say that.
That's why I do it. Most of the celebration moved around her, which was the way she liked it. She continued on with her study, with her schedule, her mug of hot chocolate. Lots of smiles and salutes, some clapping, and with her smiling back. The political landscape was shifting. It had been a cooperative event with 3 council races participating and 2 specters in Shepard and Orbiston. She was less interested in that, would let Garrus handle that side of it, and she would catch up later on the seismic shift once the aftershocks were down to celebratory rumbles. Right now, she immersed herself in the collector ship's information, still being mined and relayed, interpreted by EDI. EDI, another extraordinary asset. They'd spoken over the 7 hours in the collector ship, thanks and appreciation shifting back and forth in understanding ways. Kara's favorite way. The collector ship had only Turian captives on it, leading her to the queasy conclusion that there was definitely more than one ship. Likely one for each species, which meant how many other ships were out there? The number of Turians likely represented years of work. Turians kept in stasis for what purpose? She did not know. All those answers buried in layers of interpretation of data and beyond the Omega-4 relay. So she needed to make some decisions. She did not know how many times she was going to have the opportunity to know 2 days ahead of time when an attack was going to take place, but an advanced network was necessary to detect collector ships entering relays. If she studied, if she compared with EDI's evaluation, she could find weaknesses in the collector design that could be exploited in ways that would make them easier to board, more reliable to waylay, not requiring an unshackled AI getting access from the equivalent of a closet. Now they knew they couldn't outright destroy the vessels. They couldn't afford to. They had to disable to preserve the life in stasis inside. They had captured a few drones alive, but they did not speak. EDI had informed her that the collectors were mutated versions of the Protheans, so they'd been slaves for 50,000 years. Hard to not imagine Harbinger wanting to talk to her because he was looking for his replacement, some hunched and gray version of a human, maybe retaining green eyes. She'd heard Harbinger through the door for hours, though she hadn't answered. Everyone else had heard it. A few attempts to speak from other crew, but no response. Just taunting. Addressing him had not been a good use of her time while she had been at a collector ship console. Thane joined her at her usual spot in the galley, and she smiled. I had expected to see you celebrating, perhaps engaged in interviews. She tilted her head. Not my thing. Either of them. I'm just studying. I'm leaving that to Spectre Orbiston and the Council. I try to stay out of the spotlight as much as I can. I'm sure you didn't give interviews, but did you celebrate at the end of your missions? Thane imagined briefly returning home after he'd been wrist-bound to Irikah, often waiting until nightfall, anticipation building, memories relived. He'd wake her with his hands and his voice, her venom on his tongue. The way she would sigh and move from sleep to fully awake, her arms open to him, her body open to him. She was Grace in starlight and glowstone, with his tongue following the lines of her colors. She wore sculpted veils ruched to the curves and swells of her body, draping sheer over fallen lines, falls of delicate fabric over her shoulders and breasts, that glorious cloth celebrated as it eased off her, as he shifted it aside, or his hands roamed over it, or under, according to their will and whim. It had been yet another layer of familiar beauty and grace that belonged to her, and therefore to him. Ray, I miss you. After a moment of consideration, he told her. Celebrations were more in the form of devotions, prayers, thanks. I like that. That's a good tradition. Garrus arrived and went to the collector ship first, led to Russ, who greeted him with a parallel press of his forearm, a greeting between friends and comrades. Shepard had handed the ship over to Turian supervision. There were medical ships and counselors, hopeful family on the other sides of Mass Effect gates, shuttles, and transport taking out the recovered. Only military and hierarchy personnel or those affiliated with the Council were on the ship at this time. They didn't give away the location, concerned about being swamped. Although Shepard had been assured through EDI that the ship was not giving out any transmissions, and Russ believed this to be true, it was essentially a military zone and required discipline. Russ gave him an overview, the ship huge. Garrus finally asked him,
How was the mission itself?
Russ had tried to think of what to tell Garrus. I wanted to kill her did not, again, seem the right thing to say. Russ still did not want to kill her any less, unfortunately. He was grateful to be off the Normandy and taking care of Turian concerns that were clean and tragic and took up his time. He was glad to see Garrus at the end of the successful mission and could not find the words to somehow throw shade on a mission that had rescued more than 500,000 Turians. It was difficult, and there were a few times I thought we were all gonna die. Garrus had smiled.
I know that feeling.
She unshackled the AI on her ship. Garrus's brow ridges rose.
Really?
Not a question. He didn't doubt it.
But everything's okay?
Yeah, I mean, other than a lot of people not knowing where they are or what year it is, yeah.
Good. Thank you. Again. I don't think I can express how much.
I'm proud to be a part of it. And he was, proud even inexplicably of the fact that he wanted to kill her. Once again, she'd told a good story and managed to convince. Fuck if he could figure it out. If she told improbable stories that always came true, didn't that make her a prophet? Russ was still not interested in religion, racking up her successes as dangerous and potentially taking them all out in one tragic wipe of the slate. And he'd be there for the next one. And the next one, biting his tongue and wanting to kill her. Garrus smiled at him, and that was more than enough motivation to keep on doing it. As he thought, anything for you, Garrus.
Kara pre-authorized Garrus's entry onto the ship and into her quarters, so he was able to walk on like he owned the place. He did what Kara didn't, made a point to stop in and speak to each member of the team that had participated, thank them each personally and on behalf of the hierarchy and the council. He introduced himself to EDI. He spoke to Joker. He introduced himself to Thane, who seemed respectful, dignified, and far too pretty. Why hadn't she told him that he was that pretty? Those introductions all made, he took the elevator to her quarters, savored being on the Normandy, where he wanted to be, in the quarters where he wanted to stay. She wasn't asleep, so she met him at a dead run, with him lifting her and spinning her around for the fun of it, laughing and then lowering her to him, her arms wrapping around his shoulders and her legs high around the base of his ribs. So he had to look up at her instead of down. He smiled at her and asked her as he had years ago, "How much do you know about Turian culture?"
She kissed his crest, his cheek plates. Enough to know I shouldn't be doing this.
Spirits, yes you should. There are a few things you should know.
She leaned down, grazing her teeth along the height of his neck. Mm-hmm. I'm listening.
He groaned and put her down on her feet, saying, "Listen from there. I'm going to get really distracted and lose my train of thought. One more step and I'm in reverie and I have to stop talking, so listen." He'd gotten used to her size. She seemed the right size now, but not the sense of diminution from it, as though he should be calling her young lady and wagging his finger at her for her behavior. He could not escape the sense of youth in her. It manifested in odd ways. She bounced on her feet.
I love stories.
More childlike comparisons. "I thought of a few things you should know, things that do not at all impact what you've asked me to promise, because just as you've discovered kissing, you can discover other things."
She wasn't worried at all until he started unfastening his shirt. Her brows rose. This is escalation.
"Damn right it is. Just hold on, I'll explain."
I like the explaining part. He removed his shirt, lines of hide and muscle, plate and cowl down to his waist. You're beautiful.
"Thank you. So are you." Her smile was crooked, like she didn't believe him. He'd address that later. For now, he took her hand and guided it to a ridge on his shoulder, a seam of plate with a small indentation between. He explained, right there, both sides, scent, in particular, marking scent for a mate. In this case, you.
Won't other Turians know?
"Limayeth, only Russ is on this ship. You barely speak to anybody. It doesn't last long. Intended to be applied often. I know I can't every day, but right now, yes. I think you can survive me taking off my shirt after you captured a collector vessel."
She felt too good, too happy, too assured that Turians on this day of all days would not hold loving him against her. So did he, clearly, and she was curious, and he was so beautiful. He took her hand and dragged it through what seemed to be a waxy shallow reservoir, on her fingertips and under her nails if she let them scrape. He moved her hand to her throat, caressing there, and it was him. More him. Extra him. More beautiful, her eyes closing and her head tilting back. Bliss.
"That is yours. Feel free to ask me to remove my shirt at any time."
Am I allowed to ask you to never put it back on?
"Yes. The second thing about bonding, Limayeth, is that I would take your last name."
She did snap out of it there for a moment, still pleasure, bliss, blurred, but surprised. Turians did keep their culture close, and she could do research, but many things were not written down at all.
"You asked me not to look, to not find your name, but I am asking you now, Kara, tell me. I won't look. I will not find it. Whatever you wish to keep hidden, you can hide until you feel safe. But tell me your name. Let me know what my name should be. Take my scent as my bondmate. Then kiss me. For hours. I'll stay just long enough to have a lovely chat with my former commander. 2 hours, then I will leave. But I'll leave something behind on your body, and you'll give me something to take with me in my heart."
She held his face in trembling hands. Her pinky fingers slid under his mandibles as he pulled them tight to trap them, as he did before, as he would again. Fanning. My name is Kara Fanning.
"Then my name is Garrus Fanning. It only matters that we know it. Thank you. Kiss me, Kara Fanning."
She pulled his head down and did as her bondmate asked, scent and name and reverie. All perfect, as they should be. Her hands learning the height at his waist and the sculpted angles and arches of cartilage and plate for not enough hours.
He did speak, telling her she was beautiful, hoping it sank into her skin like his scent, telling her under reverie, proving it with his body. He told her until there was no doubt she believed him.